Greetings, everyone. Welcome to the Demo Hub. Today, we have an exciting demo to walk you through, packed full of AI development and Git integration, all coming into Snowflake. At the end, we're going to build a fun project. There is going to be a lot to unpack. On the screen, you're going to see the agenda for the demo. We're going to look at Cursor.AI. If you haven't heard about Cursor, we will talk about that. Cursor is one of those tools and solutions that you're going to hear about it one way or another. Is becoming that popular. We're going to look at some VS Code integration, Snowflake extension for VS Code. We'll bring all of that together and build a Snowflake demo factory. You can imagine a way for you to prompt and have demos ready to go to learn about Snowflake and all the features. And I think that there is no better way to showcase what we're going to see today than to actually prompt something using AI. As part of that, we'll see integrations. There's going to be a lot. I did not want to script this particular demo too much and make it too polished, because then we might miss certain things as we go through. My goal is to walk through step by step, so you can see me click on things and go really slow. Timestamps will be left in the description below, but you can pause, come back, follow along and get all of this. This is the future, right? As we think about co-pilot, coding assistants, and intelligent IDEs, I think this is the future. So with that said, let's jump right into our very first setup here, which will be Cursor.AI. Now, what is Cursor? Cursor is an intelligent coder assistant. If you're familiar with GitHub Copilot or Snowflake Copilot or any Copilot out there, Cursor is the new IDE that is really taking the development space by storm. So what you're going to do to get Cursor, obviously go to the website Cursor.com. is the AI Copilot assistant. Now, this was built on Visual Studio Code. So if you're familiar with Visual Studio Code, you're going to be very comfortable with Cursor. Now, go ahead, download Cursor. I already did that. Once you have it downloaded, open up Cursor. And it looks like this on the screen when you open it for the first time. The experience is very similar to Visual Studio Code. To begin, let's open up a project. I'm going to put this project in a folder called DemoHub Factory. So with Visual Studio Code, you tend to work within projects and folders. Right now, DemoHub Factory folder is blank. There is no demo in there. And we're going to walk through all of that. But before we jump in, let's take a look at Cursor. If you're familiar with Visual Studio Code, this will be very familiar to you. But if you're new to Visual Studio Code, this is an intelligent IDE that brings the power of some Gen AI tools to speed up your development. On the left side is the navigation pane. If you're new to Cursor for the first time, I encourage you to click on this tool on the right side and check out a couple of settings. It's a paid tool. There is a free version, but if you're going to go far with it, there is a paid version, very similar to the way ChatGPT has a paid version. Right now, I'm working with my paid account. And you can come in here and put certain rules, because Cursor is going to use Gen AI to generate code. For me, I have a very simple, just for illustration purposes, a rule to say whenever Cursor is generating code, and you're going to see why this is important here shortly, it should always write it in Snowflake SQL compliant, because we're going to be doing a demonstration tailored on the Snowflake platform. Now, if I was writing code for, say, a React or Angular.js, you're going to want to put that in here as part of your rules and select that the Cursor rules should be included. That is something I would definitely want to update as my very first settings. Decide what you want for privacy mode. Next, you're going to want to verify the models. Again, Cursor leverages ChatGPT, Omni, Tubo, OpenAI, Anthropic, Google. It leverages all of that to help you generate code. So you don't have to go to ChatGPT, prompt for your code, copy it, paste it into your IDE. Cursor gives you all of that. So in here, I'm using Heku and I'm using Sonnet. Sonnet is very powerful. You can go to some of the older versions of Sonnet. GPT-4 is a little bit older now. I think most people would be really relying on, say, 4 or Mini or Preview. So depending on what your need is, you can always dial in the correct model you want. And if you want your own private OpenAI key, you can always bring that in here. So it's not just the models that the Cursor team is using, but you can use your own keys and keep the data within your ecosystem. But that may increase cost. So something to be aware of. In this case, I'm keeping it vanilla, nothing added here. So it's very straightforward. set up for me. Next, you're going to want to set up the features. In here, Composer, this is gold. Once you go through the demo, this will be a big piece of why Cursor is highly differentiated from what you might have done in the past. You're going to love this Composer on how it can multi-edit files in different ways that it's just mind-blowing, to be honest. I didn't change much in here, but depending on your needs, you can change the Composer settings. Composer really helps you with multi-file edits at the same time. And then there are some better features, windows and long context windows. For those, I just leave them as blank. So those are the primary settings. If you're setting up Cursor for the very first time, you're going to want to make sure that those are all set up accordingly. Now, let's go ahead and close that. And the interfaces for Cursor here to your right, if I toggle with this, it brings the right pane. This is how you can chat with Cursor, nothing to write home about. If you've chatted with any chatbot, this gives you that initial experience. It's very plain. It takes a little while to think, but it should come back with a result. Below here, you can see the results are coming back, and these are results that most people will be familiar with if you work with ChatGPT in any regard. Here, you can see it's using the model. Now, if you did not want to use this model, you can always change the model. A couple of things to call out here. Let's say you wanted the answer grounded in a particular source link. You can actually do that. You can copy the URL or a URL to any documentation, do the @ sign, and then you can reference a file, a folder, a code base, web page, links, GitHub repo. You can index an entire repo, and then you can chat with that repo. So it does give you a very powerful interactivity. Now it's going to answer that prompt based on this link we've provided. You can see it's looking at the web pages, and then it should give us the answer. This is the chat interface for Cursor. Again, if you've interacted with any of the chatbots out there, Anthropic, Claude, Gemini, or even ChatGPT, this is very similar. But this is not what we're here to demo. We're going to demo something more interesting. On the left side, if we go over, again, Cursor is built on the Visual Studio Code backbone, which is an open source IDE, very popular. The experience here is going to be very similar. You come in, you can integrate with Git, you can access the same extensions that Visual Studio Code has. You can see the experience very similar to what you would have from a Visual Studio Code perspective. When you install Cursor for the very first time, you can import all the settings from Visual Studio Code and progress from there. I did not have to reinstall all of this because I had them from my Visual Studio Code. It came over to Cursor as part of the import. There you have it. This is a quick overview of what the Cursor or UI is if you're working with Cursor for the very first time. Now, once we have this, the next thing we're going to want to do is leveraging this for actually writing code. So we've seen what the Cursor IDE is. You can load it, pay for it. As a matter of fact, let's talk about the payment term. If you go to the Cursor website, you download it. It doesn't show the pricing, but there is a pricing page. For free, you get a certain amount of trials, certain amount of completions. But if you're going to do anything serious, you're probably going to want to pay for it. It's a little bit expensive than some of the models out there. I think ChatGPT alone is about $9 or $10. I don't recall what it is. But you can imagine with Cursor, you get access to not just one, but you're getting access to almost how many models were out here. You're getting access to Claude, GPT-4. So you're getting access to almost all of this in one single payment. I'll leave it for you to decide if this is expensive or not. But the utility is definitely there, and hopefully this demo will do it justice. Now, let's go back here. We've installed Cursor. Let's go back. We've installed Cursor. We've seen the IDE. Let's talk about Visual Studio Code and the Snowflake extension as part of Visual Studio Code, because this is going to be a big building block for us to create the demo factory, which we're trying to create in the Snowflake ecosystem as well. So going back, assuming you have a Snowflake extension installed, if you don't have this, go ahead, install it. It's a very popular extension. People love it. I've done tutorials on how to get it installed. I might leave some links in the description below to showcase this extension. You can install the extension from here, or if you go over to the Visual Studio Code Marketplace, you can see the extension over 150, close to 150,000 downloads as of making this video. So very versatile, lots of things you can do with it, IntelliSense. And why this is great for us is leveraging this extension. We're going to connect to Snowflake, and the code we generate will get pushed over to Snowflake from our Git integration to make that deployment easy. Generate the code as part of the demo factory, which we're going to do, is another thing to be able to push that into the Snowflake environment so we can execute that. Assuming you have this installed, we're going to go back here. And this is a very simple extension. So once you have that installed, you're going to come in and be able to connect to it. I'm not going to focus on how to work with this extension. I'm really assuming that you know how to make it work. So you can select your profile. I'm going to use the DemoHub.2 profile just to verify that profile is still active. Let's go over to the terminal and just double check. So I'm going to clear this. Just see that we can connect. All right, so we connected to it. All of this has been set up in my SnowSQL config. I'm using that now. I'm connecting to my DemoHub.2 environment. So let's go back into this, sign in into this environment. Now we'll sign into our Snowflake environment. And the goal for this is now with this connection, the code we write, we're going to push it to the Snowflake environment. And if you're familiar with the Snowflake UI, let me show you what that will look like in the Snowflake UI. This is the Snowflake environment we're going to work with, which I've just authenticated to as our DemoHub.2. As you can see below, it's a trial account just for the sake of this demo. And the idea is we're going to build some code and push it all in here. So now this has been taken care of. We do have a Snowflake environment. Now let's go back into folders and begin the writing of the code, or the demo factory, as we call it in this exercise. The way Cursor would work is in terms of a prompt. So you're not going to be writing any code here. We're going to simply be prompting. There are a couple of ways to do that. If you do Command I, it does come up with this, and I wish there was a better way for me to bring this up. It does come up with this interface, which is called the Composer. Now, the Composer is the multi-file editability in Cursor. So in here, we can chat, which is you're basically asking questions and you're getting responses. And then you can take those responses and paste into your file. So let me just create a new file here. Let's say demo.py. We went back here, we prompted, if I like this, I can apply. It's going to ask me what file to apply this to. I'm going to say apply this to demo.py file and continue. It takes that code, applies to demo.py file, and there you go. Now I can accept that. All right, so you can imagine if you have a file in a folder and you have several prompts, you can just go ahead, apply them to files and accept them and go this way. This saves you, to a certain extent, what most people would do, which is go to ChatGPT, prompt, copy that over, and then paste it in a worksheet or in a file like this. So this is at least one step beyond that, but I'm not too interested in this for now because I think this is table stakes. What I'm interested in is the Composer. This is a multi-file ability to compose many lines of code across different files to build an entire comprehensive project. So Composer is what we're going to need. Now, what are we going to compose? Let's go back and tee up the scenario here we want to compose in, which would be, we've seen the Visual Studio Code, we've seen the Snowflake extension, we've set that all up, we have our connection established. Let's jump into the demo factory code aspect of this. Now, what we'll need is this prompt. I'm going to leave the prompt in the description below. Explain what this prompt is, and you can see how the challenge now for most development isn't so much the technical aspect of writing code. It's going to be more of your ability to describe and compose what you want, because the machine can write code for us now. So that's really not something to struggle with. And that, to me, is the big point of this particular demo, if there's any takeaway from it, right? The challenge is sitting down and really thinking, what problem am I trying to solve? And how can I prompt in language to solve that? And hopefully this gives us that intuition and serves as a building block for you to take this in your own projects. So here we're going to prompt it to create a comprehensive demo environment for teaching Snowflake's latest features. This Snowflake, it could be any tool you want to learn. The environment should include tutorials for the following features: the REST API, dynamic table, hybrid table, serverless alerts, data masking, GitHub integration. So these are core features within Snowflake, extremely powerful. Now imagine you want to learn these features, you can go read the documentation, or you can come into your own demo factory and ask it to give you the tutorials ready for you, right? I think this is the future. I'm worried to be honest with you, making this demo, because I hope this is not the last demo I get to make, right? Because now if everybody can just prompt and get their own demos, why am I here doing demos on Demo Hubs? So we'll see how it all plays out, but just a fun thinking there as I worked on this. Core features, AML features. So imagine you want to learn this. We're going to ask this to be a part of the demo factory. The requirements, I needed to create a common data set that could be reused, customer behavior, sales behavior. I'm not going to read every single thing here, but I'll leave the prompt so you can see it for yourself. The tutorial structure should create each tutorial in its own file, right? I'm specifying the file names and to give you the numbers. So there should be tutorials for dynamic tables, which will use the common data set, and the scripts will all be in the dynamic tables. Each tutorial should begin with the prerequisite and the setup. Imagine, I do a lot of demos and tutorials. When you do a demo, you think about the setup. What data sets do you need? Do you have all the tables, the views? And then you do your demo, right? So this should set that all up for us. It also says include clear objectives and expected outcomes as part of that. So this is important. Provide step-by-step with explanation and comments. Add clear tear-down scripts to reset the environment. And then optional requirements here, I'm telling it to include error handling, troubleshooting, add performance optimization tips, and provide sample use cases and business scenarios for that. If you are looking to learn, or you're just looking to sharpen your skills, this should hopefully capture a majority of what is needed for an effective demo. And the last thing here is the difficulty level should be beginner, intermediate, advanced. You might prefer intermediate or advanced depending on your skill level, but this is what we're going to have the prompt do. Now, last thing here I didn't mention, create a demo for all the features. And the reason why I included this was, you'll see why it kept not giving me everything when I prompted. So I included this part at the end. Organize the content to allow users to follow each, blah, blah, blah. So it's just what we've spoken about before. So copy this, go back into Composer. Now, this is where the magic really begins to happen, right? This is the power of this. So I'm going to come back to Composer and go ahead and hit enter, paste that prompt. It should take a few seconds. Composer is unique because we're not just talking about copy pasting to one file. We're talking about building multiple different files and managing the context around that. Let's say you have a full-blown end-to-end application with the front end, the back end, the middle layer, the business logic. You can use the Composer to index that code base and have it do updates across your entire code base. This is why this is so cool. Here, we're doing the demo in real time. All right, so I've written a new prompt here to say, follow the instruction, use the Snowflake plugin connection, and then create each demo in its own file as instructed. So that's what I've told it to do. So now you can see things have changed a little bit. It's now created a new file for us, a folder called tutorials. In here, there is a file called REST APIs. I don't know why it started with REST APIs. If I go back in our prompt, REST API was the first one, which makes sense, dynamic table. So that does make sense. Now, I'm just going to accept this file and hybrid tables. I'm going to accept that for now. I'm not worried about the quality of the code. And dynamic tables, I will accept that for now. All right. So the prompt has given us 3 files, and it's asking, I can continue, serverless alerts, AI features. And so if you want it, you can just have it continue giving you the code base. But let's take a look at the dynamic tables just as an example. So in here, it's giving us the code for dynamic tables, and it's Python based. I really do not want it to be Python based, unfortunately. All right. So I'm going to do something different now. I'll say read. I've instructed this to redo this, and I need all the code to be Snowflake SQL, not Python. All right. Because in some cases, I could use the Python code, but I really want this to be a SQL for the demo factory. So it's creating the new files, and the Composer can create those files. If you're working with chat, you really cannot interact with multi-files like this. So we have the REST APIs done, dynamic tables and hybrid tables are all done. So let's go back to the SQL files. I'm going to accept that. Dynamic tables are SQL. I'm going to accept that. Hybrid tables are SQL. I'm going to accept that. So let's take a quick look at dynamic tables or SQL as an example. So now we have this. tutorials, dynamic tables, the difficulty is beginner, or it does create some tables, insert sample records into it, which is what we want. It creates a dynamic table with a lag of 1 minute. That's amazing, right? It does tell us how to query the dynamic table, show the dynamic table, alter dynamic table, we refresh. And in true dynamic table fashion, because it's declarative, it's going to insert some more records and then alter and refresh again. Now we can see the summary view, which is what is created here, which is the dynamic table generated for us. And so I love this. This is amazing because we're doing all of this in the Snowflake with the Visual Studio Code extension available. You can execute this code right away if you wanted to. Let's say you haven't seen dynamic tables before and you're just trying to learn this for the first time. So the table has been created. Let's insert some records. Voila, 3 records have been inserted. Let's create the dynamic tables. Hopefully the syntax is correct. The dynamic table has been created. Let's insert this query. So that's 100, 1799. Pay attention to that. Now let's show dynamic tables. We have a new dynamic table here. Let's refresh that. Nothing was refreshed. I'm going to insert new records back into the base table because that's the idea. You insert into the base table and the dynamic table refreshes. We've inserted 2 records. Now I'm going to force refresh the dynamic table. We've picked up the 2 records. Now let's select the summary. If you recall, it was 1799. Let's see what it comes up. So it's gone up. So it's added about 1,000 there. All right. This is how the dynamic table works. Before we drop that, because we did ask for the cleanup script, let's go back into the UI and do a refresh here. We're going to go to demo. We're going to go to public. We've been creating a dynamic table. So here is a dynamic table, what we just created a few seconds ago. You can see the graph of the dynamic table. You can see the refresh history showing up here. This is all live, right? We've gone from not knowing what the dynamic table is to having a full demo tutorial lesson of practice environment ready to go with the scripts at your fingertips just by prompting. Create the source, insert the records. I didn't have to write any of this, and this is ready to go. Let's look at the REST APIs. Let's say you want to interact with REST APIs. It tells you to create the API integration, extend a function, and I might challenge this at some point, right? Because there is a scenario that I have in here, which would be to get weather data. You can get weather data from the Snowflake marketplace. Assume that you have some API or webhook you want to interact with. You can essentially prompt for that script like this as part of this demo factory. Now we're going to create the table, insert records, call the API endpoint, grab that data, load it in there. It's very amazing. But let's go back. Let's close all this, close all of these scripts as part of the demo factory. Let's go back and it says, what did it say here in the composer? I have done this, included all of that. Which one do you like? Let's say continue with integration. And which one should we do, guys? Help me out here. Let's do masking. I think masking is a fun one. So just like that, we should get some new demos. And I'll leave the Python files there just for the sake of it. So just like that. Now we have new files created. The Git integration is working on the masking. So where is GitHub integration? Take a look. This one is intermediate. So this is not beginner. It looks correct to me just by knowing what the code should look like. So it's creating an API integration. It's creating the Git repository. I think it's missing the secret. It didn't mention the Git secret. It is missing the secret. And this is where I'm going to show something that you can also do to improve the results here. I don't think I'm liking this code that I see here just by glancing at it. So how do we fix it? Sometimes when you prompt, you don't always get the correct answer. I really want it grounded in the particular documentation. So let me show you how we can do that and hopefully fix this. I think this is a good case in point. I'm glad this came up. Let's go back into the browser and do this in real time. Let's do Snowflake GitHub integration. I want to go to the Snowflake website and grab the documentation. So now this is the documentation for creating GitHub integration in Snowflake for your CI/CD and your DevOps. It says create a secret. This will be your personal access token for GitHub. And then it uses that secret to create that API integration. Then you use the API integration to create the GitHub connection. I know this is the correct documentation and this is what I want. So what do we do here? We're going to go copy this link, Git setup, and this is why Cursor becomes really cool. So I would say, because we can reference web links, paste that link and say, all right, so all I've done here is to say, we're going to have to update the GitHub code, leveraging the latest documentation from the Snowflake website. So now it's going in, and because it's using one model, it's deciding Cursor is picking the right model. Sometimes it will use Omni, and sometimes I would say use Sonnet. I think coding Sonnet is really good, so maybe that's why it's using it for good reasoning. It should have picked up the updated documentation using Secret. So now you see what it says, right? The tutorial now follows Snowflake recommended approach for authenticating using secrets, which wasn't there before. This is exceptional. This is great. We want this. Now I'll go back into the GitHub files. You can see those changes have been merged already into that code base. If this doesn't blow your mind, I really don't know what is in terms of the ability to produce and develop with the speed of thought. Now it does ask for the secret. It's merged all of that into the code base. I think things here do look good. Let's accept that for now. If I wanted to actually put in my correct secret there and my personal access token, obviously, I wouldn't do that on the call or on the demo. But this is it. Should we keep going? Let's keep going. What tutorial haven't we touched on? Let's do Cortex fine-tuning. Snowflake Cortex fine-tuning. I think that's a good one. Next on Snowflake Cortex fine-tuning. And I think it might have some problems with this, just my suspicion. So now we're creating a new file, number 6. You can get infinite amount. Just imagine you wake up in the morning and you're like, I just want to learn something new today. Just go ahead and prompt and you get the code and you're off and ready to go. So Cortex fine-tuning, it's doing that. I was suspecting, oh, wow. It is, I did not expect it to use this approach, because what it's doing here is getting some training data, which is key pair to summarize the input text and the output and the category. It creates a compute pool, creates a model registry, and then it's saying the target model. I doubt that this doesn't look to me correct. So let's go back and do Snowflake Cortex, fine-tuning with Snowflake Cortex. So I know that this will be the correct documentation. What I love about Snowflake documentation is how thorough it is. So again, in here, there'll be examples. So now I'm going to go back as we've done before. Tell it for the Cortex fine-tuning, go off the Snowflake documentation. So it's going to think again and hopefully regenerate it. I just know the code. So looking at it, I can tell that the syntax is correct or not. But if you don't have that luxury, you might have to play with it a little bit to get the correct syntax. So in real time, it's remerging things. It's changed things a little bit. Now this starts looking a little bit more sensible to me. Creates a table for the training data, creates a validation data, Cortex fine-tune. I think that looks correct. And it goes ahead, then you can check the fine-tuning status with that. This looks more sensible than the previous one. All right, let's accept this for now. So we have everything ready to go. Imagination is what is going to stop you at this point in terms of what you can get access to and quickly learn from this. So before we wrap this up, all the code we've been running, if you come here to monitoring query history, this is all happening live, right? Everything I'm working on is all coming here in real time. There's no magic happening. Let's create a new customer data. Before we run that, I'm going to just show you guys that this is a real-time demo. There's no customer table in here. And if I execute this, table should have been successfully created. Let's insert the records by executing that. If we refresh this, we have that. So this is all real-time stuff using Visual Studio Code or Cursor to interact with Snowflake. If that's all we did and ended the demo right there, I think this should still hopefully be very valuable to you, right? Just installing Cursor and leveraging that to develop and use the power of open AI, Gen AI models to generate code and push that into your Snowflake environment. Obviously, you can use Snowflake Copilot as well for that. This just gives you another option and preference if you want to go down. So this is good. But you might say, how do we manage this file? It would be nice to push this into a Git repo and generate the code here, push it into my Git, and then have that sync over into Snowflake So I have access to all of it, managed and governed in a secure way. And if that's what you're thinking, you are in luck, because that's what we're going to see next, which is GitHub integration and working with Snowside, which is the next thing we'll should demo here to see. Now, how would that work? I'm not going to be teaching Git here. I think we've done some demos on Git in the past. If you're new to Git, check out the demos. But what this entails is a Git environment. And I have one here created for this. I created this account for us to use called DemoHub.dev on GitHub. There is a repo here. You can create as many repos as you want. I would use this to push all the code, or sync it up to the Git repo, and then have that Git repo connected to Snowflake. You can go back and forth. Now, going back into my Cursor environment to interact with Git, you simply click on the Git connector. I'm not a Git expert, so I might struggle with Git, but if I do, hopefully the composer or the chat is going to help us with that. So let's initialize a Git repo, because one more thing to check here, demo factory tutorials, Git hasn't been initialized from my folder here. So let's go ahead and initialize that repo. And we'll say first commit. I know people would say put more details in your comment, and then I will go ahead and push that. There are no stages. All right, so your repository has no remote configured to push to. So add a remote. Let's go ahead and add a remote here. Let's create a new demo factory and make that private for the sake of it. Add a README, create that. So demo factory. So now I have this private repo here, which is good. I'll go back into my code base. All right, so let's select demo factory. All right, so that was successful. And we should have had the code published over to demo factory for the initial commit. Now, if you have an existing code base, the Git aspect to it, I'm not going to go into all the details, assuming you have that set up. But let's verify that going over to Git and checking my repos. What repo did we commit to? I did create a new repo called demo factory and push the commit into this. So this is the repo we've just committed to demo factory with all the code that we've worked on. The next thing you might be asking is, how do I now take this demo factory and be able to have this sync over to Snowflake? And this is where the Snowflake Git integration comes in. We're going to go back to demo factory 1, back to Snowflake. Let's go to the Snowflake environment. We're going to create a new Git integration. We're going to create a Git repo, give it a name, paste in the repo from here, and get your GitHub API integration. If you did not have this API integration, follow these instructions, you can create that. So this is all coming together. Now, that's an API integration. Where do we want this? DemoDB, public, and give it a good comment. Authentication, I always want to authenticate. Secret would be in my GitHub secret. So I did this already. So all of that is set up. Now create your, all right. So I did not like my setup. Let's try this one more time. Oh, I think I know why it did not like that, because it's not part of my allow location. So let's go back to projects, go to GitHub. This is the steps for the setup, which I ran before. Just to follow, you're going to do the use database, create a secret, make sure you get your personal access token set up there. And then what you need is allow locations. And in these allow locations, you're going to want to put the correct repo set up here. So set that up in my allow locations, because I did change the repo. Then once you have that, you can run usage. You can do it by script as I'm doing, or you can do it by the UI. Now that's set up, let me go back to the UI just so that we work from the UI perspective. So create a new GitHub repo name, demo factory 1, paste that repo, API integration is going to be the same. Now we have it allowed, so that should be good. The database we want is DemoDB public. Application, you definitely want that. Secret, the same secret should be fine. Go ahead and create that. Now the repo has been created and your GitHub now is integrated to Snowflake. And now this gives you the ability to work directly from Cursor, generate the code, be able to commit and push that over to your Git repo that's synced over to Snowflake, and you can deploy that at scale as part of your CI/CD process. So going back here, DemoDB public, GitHub repository, demo factory 1 is what we just did. All of the tutorials we just did from a demo factory is available right here. So if I want to learn about dynamic tables, my code is right here. I can create a notebook. I can copy this to a worksheet. I can execute this immediately. Let's copy this to a worksheet. And voila, what do we have here? We have dynamic tables showing up, right? So all of the things we just did, the tutorial or demo factory, we now have a demo here. And we can execute this, create a replace table, insert the records, use the warehouse. We'll just execute all of this. And when you can drop and clean it up as needed after the fact too, right? Now, this gives us that end-to-end ability to do that. So let's say we want to update this. I'll just give a simple comment here in terms of making some updates to my GitHub integration. And then let's go to the dynamic tables demo and say, modify this. I want to modify this. So instead of inserting just 5 records, think about inserting more records. Maybe you want to test for performance, right? Instead of Composer, let's go to chat. For chat, I'm going to add the context. And my context would be the file, which is dynamic tables. All I'm saying is modify this demo to test for performance and scale. I'm curious how this will approach this. Is it going to change how many records get inserted? What would change about this if you're not just demonstrating dynamic tables, but you're also demonstrating performance and scale? I'm curious to see what this comes back with. It should be working just within the context of this file. If I wanted to go across multiple files, then I will be in Composer, right? So hopefully you're seeing the difference there. It's using Omni preview for this prompt. All right, so it's come back. Now you see, this is fascinating. So it's come back now. It's not just inserting 1 or 2 records as such. It's now using the random table generator, which is a very powerful. Hopefully we can all see this. Let me expand this some more. It's using the random table generator, which is very powerful, right? Because the beauty of Snowflake is not just dynamic tables. You can do dynamic declarative processing, but can you scale up and down? Do you have the power and the compute? And how Snowflake makes that easy is always a great story to tell. If you're creating a demo as part of a demo factory, this allows you to do that. So let's apply this. And because we're applying it to this, it's doing all the merging for us, right? So it's doing all the merging and updates. So I'm going to accept that. And now my code has been changed to include testing for scale and performance. You can save the file. See the white dot up there? Click on Command S to save that. Next, let's try this. Well, let's just continue. I already committed to GitHub. Sometimes I'm worried about making Composer type changes across multiple files and worried that something might be broken. Now you got to go back and undo stuff on multiple files. Because I committed this already, then if this breaks any stuff, I'm fine, or we are fine. So let's go back and say update. All right, so what we've said here is update all the files in this code base to not only demo the features, but to include demonstrating scale and performance. Now, you can do this in Composer. Again, you cannot do this in chat. So hopefully this difference is becoming clear for us at this point. Okay, so it says, I'll start by updating the Cortex fine-tuning tutorial to include scale and performance. I'll show you how to handle larger data sets and monitor performance and metrics. So it's thinking. Let's open up Cortex fine-tuning. It hasn't made the updates yet. At some point, it's now making the updates. Oh, I can tell you, it's almost euphoric each time you see this. And I'm like, wow, just imagine how we used to code before this and how many hours will go into this. And this is just a whole new paradigm, and all the changes have been made, which I like. I haven't validated it, but I think I'll take it. So that's done. And then it always is conservative. It will ask you, do you want to continue? And then you can keep continuing with the prompt. For now, I wouldn't continue with it. I think we have enough. Let's go back to Git, make a commit. So we're going to commit and push at the same time. It's pushing to Git. If that's successful, we go over to Snowflake, go to repo back, which we have here in DemoDB. because Snowflake will sync all of that into the demo factory. Just 30 minutes ago, refresh that to get my new code base. Takes a few seconds, open up the tutorials. The first one we changed was dynamic tables. Open up dynamic tables because we did change this to include performance. Now we can bring this into a worksheet. We now have the new demo here in my worksheet ready to go, testing not just the few records we had, but also you can tell a story. How many records? That's about 10 million records in how many seconds? Oh, it's unbelievable. It's just powerful. Each time we do this, it's just really amazing. So now you can go create your dynamic tables to refresh every minute or so, and then check your sales records have been calculated, aggregated based on that, and every minute it's gonna keep getting updated. Now it does insert back 100,000 records. So the story here is we're not just showing dynamic tables, but you're also showing for 1 million records, right? And being able to do 1 million records, and we're talking about seconds for this to do. This is why Snowflake is so unique, right? It's simple, it's easy, it can scale, and it just works like this. And now you're bringing the power of generating code, creating these tutorials, creating these demos, having it ready at your fingertips, deploying that, integrating it with your CI/CD in place. This is mind-blowing, and this is the future, which got me excited to say, hey, we're going to put this into a demo and a tutorial for you guys. Hopefully, whether you're using this to practice for yourself, whether you're using it to solve business problems that are more complicated than what we've seen here today, I'm really hoping that this has given us clear guidance on it. All right. I think the main essence of what we wanted to touch today has been covered. So let's just do a quick recap of what we've seen, right? The landscape of programming is changing for sure. Fundamentally, we're going into a whole new paradigm. And Cursor.AI is at the forefront of it. I was one of those people. I started programming in I've used everything in you can imagine, right? Notepad++ to using Atomic, to using Java, jQuery, Eclipse, NetBeans, you name it, I've used all of them, right? And I ended up on Visual Studio Code because it's very powerful. But now Cursor is really that next generation. There are other ones, GitHub Copilot, and I'm going to make some demos on those too. There is Bolt, there is Replit, there are so many tools out there that are coming up, and this is really the next frontier to accelerate that development. And that integration to Snowflake to me is golden to take advantage of. So that is what Cursor is. You can follow along with this demo on the free trial. And at some point, you're going to hit some limit at that, and then you have to pay the $20 or so. Visual Studio Code brings that familiarity. The Snowflake extension just makes it easy to work because I have that Snowflake extension set up already. It just becomes so easy at that point to connect. I can change different contexts. I'm not going to edit my SQL config just so you don't see my passwords and things like that. But that gives you the ability for all of that. And then we saw about Snowflake Demo Factory. You can create tons and tons of demos or tutorials to learn all the different concepts that Snowflake is talking and announcing. And if you are worried, I prompt ChatGPT and I don't always get the correct answer, just reference the specific documentation as we've shown here. If you're working on some concept on Snowflake and maybe LLM REST API, I need a demo for this, go ahead and grab that, right? There's really no excuse at this point to not be getting the latest information on things like this. So go ahead, grab the link and say, use this documentation. So use this documentation to create a new demo. It's that simple for things like this. We have a new Cortex LLM API, SQL being created, ready to go. There's no excuse to not be taking advantage of things like this at this point in time or to get ahead of things. So we've seen the demo factory concept as well. And then GitHub integration, being able to push all of this into Git, syncing that into Snowflake. So you can deploy, you can orchestrate, you can make this to production if that is what you're building in your scenario. So let's see this. So this is been created based on the documentation. If I wanted this, I will commit this code and it will all be available in my Snowflake environment ready to go. And you can do this Python, you can do this for Java, you can do this for any language that you want. So in this case, it's copying this into a Snowflake Python worksheet as opposed to a SQL worksheet. And so now this is copying, this is a SQL worksheet still, but it's copying that code over into this a Python worksheet. And you can deploy this, you can orchestrate that. So Hopefully this gives you all those concepts. And as always, I know it's a lot. Things are moving fast. I'm going to try to leave links in the description below, but don't hesitate to reach out. Let me know if you have questions. And if this was valuable to you in any way, give it a share this with them. I get value out of it. If there are topics you want me to make demos on, I love to do this thing. Let me know again in the comment section below. I really do appreciate you watching and sticking to the end. This has been Fru here with DemoHub. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next demo.